Promised to another, the Earl's daughter wept, until the ruthless war duke claimed her as his bride. The dawn arrived cold over Brimwall Keep, casting pale silver across stone walls that had witnessed 3 generations of duty. Lady Seren of Earl stood at her chamber window, her fingertips pressed against glass that burned with frost, and felt the weight of a destiny she had never chosen settle upon her shoulders, like iron chains disguised as silk. Her father's voice still echoed from the previous evening, formal and absolute. "The contract is signed. Lord Halver Trenmore shall be your husband before the season turns." The words had fallen upon her heart with the finality of a judge's gavel. Seren turned from the window, her gaze falling upon the small wooden box that rested on her dressing table. Within it lay her mother's amber brooch, the only inheritance that spoke of love rather than obligation. The glass caught morning light and held it prisoner, glowing as though it contained a fragment of summer sun. She lifted the brooch with trembling fingers, feeling its warmth against her palm, a warmth that seemed impossible in so cold a world. "My lady, your father requests your presence in the drawing room." The maid's voice came soft but insistent through the door. Seren fastened the brooch at the base of her throat, a talisman against the hours to come. She descended the grand staircase with practiced grace, each step a measured surrender. The drawing-room doors stood open like the mouth of some vast creature prepared to swallow her whole. Inside, her father, the Earl of Brimwall, stood beside the fireplace, his posture rigid with aristocratic certainty. Across from him sat Lady Varyn Wolcarne, her father's sister by marriage, a woman whose beauty had long ago hardened into something that resembled porcelain but cut like glass. "Seren." Her father did not turn. "Lord Trenmore shall arrive within the fortnight to formalize arrangements. You will comport yourself with dignity befitting our house." "Yes, father." The words emerged hollow, a ghost of obedience. Lady Varyn's dark eyes assessed her with surgical precision. "The match is advantageous beyond measure. Lord Trenmore commands respect throughout the realm. You ought to display gratitude rather than this melancholy bearing." Serene's fingers found the amber brooch, pressing until she felt the edges bite through her glove. "I am grateful for the honor bestowed upon our family." The lie tasted of ash. "See that you remember it." Lady Varyn rose, her gown of deep moss green rustling like dead leaves. "A woman's highest purpose is to secure her family's position. Your sentiments are immaterial." When they dismissed her, Seren fled to the gardens where ancient apple trees grew in twisted beauty. Spring had not yet touched their branches, but here beneath their bare limbs, she allowed herself the luxury of tears. They fell upon the amber brooch, and for a moment she imagined her mother's voice whispering that courage was not the absence of fear, but the refusal to be consumed by it. The sound of hooves upon gravel shattered her solitude. Seren rose quickly, brushing moisture from her cheeks, but not quickly enough. A figure had dismounted near the garden gate, a man whose presence seemed to alter the very air. He stood well over 6 feet, broad-shouldered and severe, clad in a long coat of black wool that fell nearly to his boots. A mane of dark hair, cropped close in military fashion, framed a face of hard angles and colder resolve. His eyes found hers across the distance. They were grey as winter steel, and they saw everything. Duke Varyn Wolcarne, the War Duke, they called him. A title earned in blood across distant battlefields where he had broken enemy lines and rebuilt broken kingdoms. Seren knew of him only through whispers. Ruthless, uncompromising, a man who carried violence like other men carried titles. He should have terrified her. Instead, something in his gaze, some flicker of recognition, as though he understood the shape of her suffering, made her breath catch in her throat. "Forgive the intrusion, my lady." His voice was deep, roughened by years of shouting orders across chaos. "I was told I might find the Earl within." Seren curtsied, though her legs felt unsteady. "His Grace is in the drawing-room, Your Grace. I shall summon—" "No need." He moved closer and she noticed the way he walked. Purposeful, controlled, as though every step was calculated. "I know the way." But he did not immediately turn toward the house. His gaze lingered upon her face, then dropped to the amber brooch at her throat. Something shifted in his expression, too swift to name but impossible to ignore. "That is a remarkable piece," he said quietly. "It holds light as though it were made of captured sun." Seren's hand rose involuntarily to touch it. "It was my mother's." "Then it is well placed." He inclined his head, a gesture that somehow conveyed both respect and something deeper, something that felt like sorrow, meeting sorrow in the space between two strangers. "I shall not keep you from your solitude, my lady." He strode toward the house, leaving Seren standing beneath the barren apple trees with her heart beating a rhythm she did not recognize. She watched him disappear through the doors, and only then did she realize that for the first time since her father had announced her engagement, she had forgotten, if only for a moment, that she was promised to another man entirely. The drawing room had fallen into a silence so profound that Seren could hear the settling of ash in the fireplace. She stood just beyond the doorway, unseen, as her father's voice rose with barely contained anger. "Your Grace arrives unannounced and speaks of matters that do not concern you." Duke Varyn Wolcarne's response came measured, deliberate. "I speak of matters that concern every man of conscience." The lady appears reluctant. "My daughter's sentiments are not your affair." The Earl's words cracked like a whip. "The contract with Lord Trenmore is sealed. Nothing shall alter it." Seren pressed herself against the corridor wall, her pulse thundering in her ears. She had not intended to eavesdrop, but something held her frozen, some desperate need to hear what would follow. "Forgive my candor, but sealed does not mean just." The Duke's tone remained steady, though Seren detected steel beneath the courtesy. "I have seen enough of the world to recognize when duty becomes cruelty." Lady Merrin's voice cut through like a blade. "You overstep, Your Grace. What my niece thinks or feels is of no consequence. She understands her obligation." "Does she?" The question hung in the air. "Or has she merely been taught that her own heart is worthless?" Serene's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a sound that might have been a sob or a laugh. She could not tell which. No one had ever spoken such words in her defense. No one had ever suggested that what she felt mattered at all. "This conversation is concluded." Her father's pronouncement fell like a door slamming shut. "You came on diplomatic business regarding the Northern Territories. Let us attend to that, and leave family matters where they belong." "As you wish." The Duke's acquiescence sounded anything but defeated. "Though, I would remind your lordship that history judges harshly those who sacrifice the innocent upon the altar of convenience." Footsteps approached the door. Seren fled before she could be discovered, her skirts whispering against the marble as she retreated to the music room at the far end of the corridor. She sank onto the piano bench, her breath coming in shallow gasps, her mind reeling. The Duke had defended her. A stranger, a man known for ruthlessness in war, had stood in her father's house and questioned the very foundation of her arranged fate. The afternoon dissolved into evening. Seren remained in the music room, her fingers occasionally touching the piano keys, but producing no coherent melody. When the dinner bell rang, she composed herself with the skill of long practice and made her way to the dining hall. Duke Varyn sat at her father's right hand, his presence dominating the table despite his silence. Lord Trenmore had arrived during the afternoon, she learned, summoned early by some message from Lady Merrin. He occupied the seat directly across from Seren, his pale blue eyes studying her, with the detached interest of a collector appraising a new acquisition. "Lady Seren." Halvar's voice carried the smooth refinement of a man who had never known true hardship. "You look remarkably well this evening. The prospect of our union clearly agrees with you." Seren forced her lips into something approximating a smile. "You are kind to say so, my lord." "Not kind, observant." He lifted his wineglass in a subtle toast. "I have waited long for a bride of suitable lineage. Your father and I have discussed the wedding at length. 3 weeks hence, I believe, shall prove adequate for preparation." 3 weeks. The word struck her like a physical blow. So soon? She barely recognized her own voice. "Why delay?" Halvir's smile never reached his eyes. "We are neither of us children in need of extended courtship. The arrangement is practical, beneficial to both houses. Sentiment would only complicate what ought to remain simple." Across the table, Duke Varyn's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. His gaze fixed upon Halvir, with an intensity that made the temperature in the room seem to drop. "Simple," the Duke repeated, his tone deceptively mild. "You speak of marriage as though it were a ledger transaction." Halvir's smile thinned. "Is it not? Forgive me, Your Grace, but you are unmarried yourself. Perhaps you lack understanding of how such matters are properly conducted among established families. I understand more than you might imagine." The Duke set down his fork with deliberate precision. "I understand, for instance, that a woman is not property to be transferred from one ledger to another." The Earl's fist came down upon the table with enough force to rattle the crystal. "Enough! Duke Wolcarne, you are a guest in this house, but you test my hospitality beyond all reasonable bounds." Lady Merrin leaned forward, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Perhaps His Grace speaks from loneliness. A man without wife or heir often develops peculiar notions about matters domestic." "My notions are not peculiar, madam." They are merely humane. Varyn turned his gaze to Seren, and in his eyes she saw something that made her heart lurch. Not pity, but recognition. Tell me, Lady Seren, when you think of your wedding day, what do you see? The room fell silent. Every eye turned toward her. Seren felt the weight of expectation, the crushing pressure to speak the words they wished to hear. Her fingers found the amber brooch at her throat, drawing strength from its impossible warmth. I see. She paused, gathering courage from some deep reserve she had not known existed. I see duty fulfilled. I see my family's honor preserved. I see everything except myself. Her father rose so abruptly his chair scraped against the floor. You are excused, Seren. Retire to your chambers. Immediately. She stood on trembling legs, curtsied to the table, and fled. But as she reached the doorway, she heard the Duke's voice once more, low and carrying an edge that could cut stone. You silence her, but you cannot silence truth. Seren did not sleep. She lay upon her bed fully dressed, staring at the canopy above her, while the house settled into midnight quiet. The Duke's words echoed endlessly. You cannot silence truth. But what was truth? That she was trapped? That her life would be spent in service to a man who viewed her as inventory? That no amount of weeping would alter what had been decided by men who valued position over happiness? A soft knock at her door startled her upright. My lady, it was Marjorie, her maid, voice hushed and urgent. There is someone who wishes to speak with you, in the conservatory. Seren's heart hammered. Who? He did not give his name, my lady, but he wears the wolf crest, the Duke. At this hour, every rule of propriety screamed against going to him, yet Seren found herself rising, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders, and following Marjorie through the darkened corridors. The conservatory smelled of earth and sleeping flowers. Moonlight filtered through glass panels, casting silver shadows across terracotta pots and wooden benches. Duke Varyn stood near the far wall, his coat unbuttoned, his expression unreadable in the half-light. You should not be here, Seren whispered, though she made no move to leave. I know. He turned to face her fully. Yet here I stand, and here you are. She drew the shawl tighter. If we are discovered, we will not be. I have taken precautions. He moved closer, though he maintained a respectful distance. I must speak plainly, Lady Seren. Time is short, and I have never been a man for elegant deception. Then speak. You do not wish to marry Lord Trenmore. It was not a question, but Seren answered anyway. What I wish is irrelevant. That is where you are wrong. His voice carried an intensity that made her breath catch. What you wish is the only thing that ought to matter, and I will not stand silent while you are bartered like grain at market. Seren felt something inside her chest crack open, some careful wall she had built to contain her despair. You speak as though you have the power to prevent it, but you do not. No one does. The contract is signed. My father's word is law within these walls. Your father's word is not the only law that governs England. The Duke's hand moved to his coat, withdrawing a folded document. I have spent the afternoon in consultation with the magistrate. There are provisions, old laws rarely invoked, that protect a woman from being forced into marriage against her explicit will. Seren stared at the paper as though it were a serpent. You cannot mean, I mean exactly what I say. If you declare before witnesses that you do not consent, the contract becomes void. Your father may rage, Trenmore may protest, but the law will stand with you. The scandal would destroy my family. Her voice broke. My father would never forgive me. Society would... Society, the Duke interrupted, his tone hardening, is composed of cowards who mistake cruelty for tradition. Let them gossip. Let them judge. You will have your freedom. Tears spilled down Seren's cheeks, hot and unchecked. Why? Why do you care what becomes of me? You do not know me. I am nothing to you. Something shifted in his expression, a glimpse of old pain, carefully hidden but not quite buried. You are not nothing. You are a woman who deserves to choose her own fate. And He paused, seeming to weigh his words. I have seen too many people crushed beneath the wheels of duty. I will not watch it happen again, not when I have the power to prevent it. But at what cost to you? Seren stepped closer, searching his face in the moonlight. My father is powerful. Lord Trenmore has allies throughout the realm. If you stand against them, I have faced worse enemies on bloodier fields. The Duke's smile was grim. Let them come. I do not fear their politics. Seren felt herself trembling, torn between terror and something that resembled hope. I do not understand you. Men like you do not rescue women like me. Perhaps I am not the man you believe me to be. He held out the document. This is yours if you want it. The choice must be yours alone. I will not force freedom upon you any more than they should force marriage. She stared at the paper, her hand hovering but not quite touching. To take it would be to declare war upon everything she had been taught. To refuse it would be to sentence herself to a lifetime of silent suffering. The amber brooch at her throat seemed to pulse with warmth. If I do this, she whispered, there is no returning to how things were. No, the Duke agreed quietly. There is not. But perhaps how things were was never worthy of return. Seren's fingers closed around the document. The paper felt impossibly light for something that carried the weight of her entire future. I will need witnesses, she said, her voice steadier now, and courage I do not know if I possess. You possess more courage than you know. The Duke's expression softened almost imperceptibly. As for witnesses, that is already arranged. Tomorrow at the magistrate's office in the village, I will accompany you if you wish, or I will remain behind. The choice, once again, is yours. Come with me. The words escaped before she could reconsider them. Please. He inclined his head, a gesture that somehow conveyed both formality and profound respect. Then I shall be honored to stand beside you when you claim what is rightfully yours. Morning arrived with cruel swiftness. Seren woke to find Marjorie laying out a travelling dress of deep blue wool, her face carefully neutral as she worked. The carriage will be ready within the hour, my lady. Discreetly positioned near the eastern gate, as his grace instructed. Seren's stomach twisted. In the cold light of day, her midnight courage felt fragile as frost. She dressed with mechanical precision, her fingers fumbling with buttons and laces. The amber brooch she pinned over her heart, a talisman against the battle to come. The household still slept as she made her way through the servants' passages to the eastern gate. Duke Varyn waited beside a plain carriage, not his own grand conveyance, she noticed, but something anonymous that would draw no attention on the village road. Second thoughts are permitted, he said as she approached. No shame attends them. I am terrified, Seren admitted, but I am also decided. Fear does not negate choice. Something like admiration flickered across his features. Bravely spoken. Shall we? The ride to the village took less than an hour, though each minute stretched like an eternity. The Duke sat across from her in silence, his presence somehow both calming and electrifying. Seren found herself studying him in the pale morning light, the scar that bisected his left eyebrow, the hard set of his jaw, the way his hands rested on his knees with military precision. May I ask you something? She ventured. Of course. Why did you truly come to Brimwall Keep? The Northern Territories could have been discussed by letter. He was quiet for a long moment. I came because I heard rumors of a young woman being married against her will to a man known for his coldness, and I found I could not ignore them. You came to rescue me. The realization settled over her like a revelation. I came to offer you the means to rescue yourself. His grey eyes met hers. There is a difference. The magistrate's office was a modest stone building at the village centre. Inside, an elderly man with ink-stained fingers greeted them with the solemnity of one who understood the gravity of their business. Lady Seren of Earl, the magistrate intoned, you come before me of your own free will. I do. Her voice wavered only slightly. And you understand that the statement you are about to make will render null and void the marriage contract between yourself and Lord Halver Trenmore? I understand. The magistrate dipped his pen. Then speak, my lady. Let your words be entered into the record. Seren drew a breath that seemed to come from the very depths of her soul. I, Seren of Earl, daughter of the Earl of Brimwall, do hereby declare that I do not consent to marriage with Lord Halver Trenmore. The contract was made without my willing agreement. I was not asked, I was told, and I will not surrender my life to a union devoid of choice, affection, or hope. The pen scratched across parchment, immortalizing her rebellion in permanent ink. It is done. The magistrate looked up. This document now carries legal weight. The contract is void. Seren felt her knees weaken. The Duke's hand appeared at her elbow, steadying her with gentle firmness. What happens now? She whispered. Now, the magistrate said gravely, you inform your father and prepare for the consequences. They did not return immediately to Brimwall Keep. At Seren's request, the Duke directed the carriage to stop at a small chapel that overlooked the valley. She needed time to gather her shattered nerves before facing her father's wrath. Inside the chapel, light filtered through stained glass, painting the stone floor in jeweled colors. Seren sank onto a wooden pew, and the Duke sat beside her, not too close, but near enough that she felt the comfort of his presence. He will disown me, she said quietly. My father. He will cast me out with nothing. Then you will not be without resources. The Duke's voice was calm. I have properties, staff. You will not starve in a ditch, Lady Seren. I give you my word. She turned to look at him, truly look at him, and saw something in his face that made her heart stutter. Why would you do this? You barely know me. I know enough. He paused, seeming to choose his words with care. I know that you wept beneath apple trees for a future you could not escape. I know that you possess a courage most soldiers would envy, and I know that when I saw you yesterday morning, something in me that I believed long dead remembered how to feel. The confession hung between them, raw and unadorned. Your Grace, she began. Varyn, he corrected her gently. If we are to weather this storm together, you might as well call me by name. Varyn, she repeated, tasting the syllables. I do not know what comes next. I do not know who I am without my father's house. I am adrift. Then drift, with purpose. He stood, offering his hand. Come, it is time to face what must be faced, but you will not face it alone. She placed her hand in his, feeling the calluses earned through years of holding sword and reins. His grip was strong without being crushing, the hold of a man who knew his own strength and wielded it with care. Together, they walked back into the sunlight. By the time they reached Brimwall Keep, the household was in chaos. Servants rushed through corridors, voices echoed from the drawing room, and the Earl's rage could be heard from the courtyard. Seren stepped down from the carriage, her spine straight, the amber brooch catching the afternoon light. Varyn walked beside her, his presence a silent declaration that she was not without protection. The drawing-room doors burst open. Her father emerged, his face purple with fury. Behind him came Lady Meryn and Lord Trenmore, both wearing expressions of scandalized disbelief. "What have you done?" the Earl roared. "The magistrate sent word. You dare defy me in this manner. I dare claim what is mine by law and conscience." Seren's voice did not shake. "My life, my choice, my freedom." Lord Trenmore's pale eyes narrowed. "You will regret this, Lady Seren. No man of quality will have you now. You will wither into obscurity, unwanted and alone." "She will not." Varyn's voice cut through the courtyard like a blade. Every head turned toward him. He stepped forward, placing himself between Seren and her father's wrath. "She will not be alone. She will not be unwanted, because I claim her under my protection, and should any man speak ill of her, he will answer to me." The courtyard fell silent. The silence that followed the Duke's declaration stretched impossibly long, as though the very air had forgotten how to carry sound. Seren stood frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs with such force she feared it might break free entirely. Lord Trenmore recovered first, his pale features contorting with barely suppressed fury. "You claim her? By what right, Your Grace? She is not property to be claimed by any man who takes a fancy." "By the right of conscience and honor, neither of which you appear to possess." Varyn's tone remained level, but steel threaded through every syllable. "Lady Seren has made her position clear before witnesses and magistrate. The contract is void. Your claim upon her is finished." "This is madness." The Earl strode forward, his fists clenched at his sides. "You arrive at my home as a guest and proceed to destroy carefully laid arrangements, corrupt my daughter's sense of duty, and now you dare stand in my courtyard making proclamations as though you were king himself? I dare far more than that when injustice demands it." The Duke did not retreat a single step. "Your daughter is not corrupt. She is merely awake, and I will not apologize for helping her open her eyes." Lady Meryn's voice sliced through the tension like a razor. "How convenient that you suddenly developed this passion for justice. Tell me, Your Grace, what do you gain from this interference? Surely not the naive belief that you act from pure altruism?" Seren felt heat rise to her cheeks at the insinuation, but Varyn's expression never wavered. "What I gain is the knowledge that I have not become so hardened by war that I can witness cruelty and walk away unmoved. If that disappoints you, madam, I shall bear the burden of your disapproval with remarkable fortitude." "You make a mockery of us all." Lord Trenmore's hands trembled with rage. "The contract was signed in good faith. Compensation was exchanged. You cannot simply nullify agreements because you find them distasteful. The law disagrees with you." Varyn withdrew a second document from his coat. "This is a copy of the magistrate's ruling. Lady Seren's explicit refusal of consent renders the original contract invalid. Any compensation may be returned to you, though I suspect your pride has suffered far greater injury than your purse." Trenmore lunged forward as though he might strike the Duke. But Varyn's hand moved with serpentine speed to his sword hilt. He did not draw the blade, merely let his fingers rest upon it with casual menace. Trenmore froze. "I would advise against that course of action," Varyn said quietly. "I have killed men for far lesser provocations, and my patience has limits. You threaten me in front of witnesses." Trenmore's voice rose to a near shriek. "I promise you." The correction was delivered with such cold precision that Trenmore actually stepped backward. "There is a difference." Seren found her voice, though it emerged shakier than she wished. "Father, please. I cannot marry a man who views me as ledger entry. Surely you must understand. I understand that you have disgraced this family." Her father's words struck like physical blows. "You have broken sacred bonds of duty and obedience. You have made us the subject of scandal. And for what? Some childish notion of romance? Some fantasy that your feelings matter more than honor?" "Yes." The word escaped before Seren could contain it. "Yes, I believe my feelings matter. I believe I am more than a bargaining piece to secure your political alliances. I believe—" Her voice broke, but she forced herself to continue. "I believe I deserve to be seen as human." Her father's face went from purple to ash-gray. "If you walk away from this house under his protection, you walk away forever. I will not acknowledge you. You will not inherit. Your name will be struck from family records. Do you comprehend what you are choosing?" Seren's hand found the amber brooch, drawing strength from its impossible warmth. She thought of her mother, who had worn this same brooch on her wedding day. A woman who had loved deeply and taught her daughter that love was not weakness but the rarest form of courage. "I comprehend perfectly, father, and I choose freedom." Lady Meryn laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Freedom? You foolish child. You choose dependence upon a man known for violence and isolation. Duke Wolcarne has no wife, no family, no softness in him. You flee one arrangement only to throw yourself into circumstances potentially far worse. Then let it be my mistake to make." Seren lifted her chin. "At least it will be mine." The Earl turned his back on her, his shoulders rigid. "Go. Take nothing from this house save the clothes upon your back. You are no daughter of mine." The words should have shattered her. Instead, Seren felt something like relief wash through her veins. The chains had been cruel, but they had also been familiar. Now she stood free, terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. "Come." Varyn extended his hand, not as command but as invitation. "My carriage waits." Seren placed her hand in his and allowed him to lead her away from the only home she had ever known. Behind them she heard Lord Trenmore's voice, venomous and carrying. "You will regret this, Duke Wolcarne. Mark my words. You have made enemies today that will not forget." "I have made enemies on battlefields across 3 continents," Varyn replied without turning. "Your enmity troubles me not at all." They reached the carriage. Varyn handed her up with careful courtesy, then climbed in after her. As the door closed and the horses began to move, Seren allowed herself one final glance at Brimwall Keep. The grey stone walls that had sheltered and imprisoned her seemed to shrink in the distance, becoming less fortress and more memory. "Where are we going?" she asked quietly. "To Thornwild Manor, my estate in the northern reach." Varyn settled into the seat across from her. "It is remote, which will afford you privacy while the scandal settles. The staff is discreet and loyal. You will be safe there." Safe. Seren tasted the word as though it were foreign. "I am not certain I remember what safety feels like." "Then we shall help you remember." His grey eyes held unexpected gentleness. "You have been remarkably brave, Lady Seren, but you need not maintain that bravery every moment. If you wish to weep, the carriage offers privacy. I will not judge you for it." The permission undid something inside her. Seren felt tears spill down her cheeks, not tears of despair this time, but of release. She wept for the father who had chosen pride over love, for the future she had lost, and for the terrifying unknown that stretched before her like an unmarked road. Varyn said nothing. He simply withdrew a handkerchief from his coat and offered it to her, then turned his gaze to the window to grant her the dignity of private grief. When her tears finally subsided, Seren wiped her face and looked at the man who had upended her entire existence. "Why?" she whispered. "You still have not told me why you did this. The truth, Varyn. Not honor or duty or justice. Why?" He was silent for so long she thought he might not answer. Then he turned from the window, and in his eyes she saw something raw and undefended. "Because 7 years ago, I watched my sister wed a man she did not choose. I watched the light leave her eyes day by day until there was nothing left but obedience and sorrow. And when she died in childbirth, carrying a child she had never wanted, I swore I would never again stand silent while a woman was sacrificed to propriety. His voice roughened. I failed her. I will not fail you. Seren's breath caught. I did not know. I am so sorry. Do not apologize for my grief. It is mine to carry. He drew a slow breath, composing himself. But perhaps it has purpose. Perhaps it led me to that garden where I found you weeping beneath bare apple trees. And perhaps some things are meant to be, regardless of how they begin. The carriage rolled onward through countryside painted in early spring gold. Seren clutched the handkerchief in one hand and the amber brooch in the other, feeling the weight of everything she had lost and the impossible promise of everything she might yet gain. Thank you, she said softly, for seeing me, for hearing me, for believing my life was worth defending. Your life is worth far more than defending, Lady Seren. Varyn's expression held something she could not quite name, something that made her heart beat strangely. It is worth celebrating. And I intend to ensure you have the chance to discover that truth. Thornwell Manor emerged from evening mist like something from a storybook, all grey stone and ivy, with tall windows that glowed amber in the failing light. The estate sprawled across a gentle hillside, surrounded by ancient oaks and formal gardens that had been allowed to grow half wild. It looked nothing like Brimwall Keep's severe grandeur. It looked like sanctuary. It is not what most expect of a duke's residence, Varyn said as the carriage slowed. I prefer function to ostentation. It is beautiful. Seren meant it. There was something honest about Thornwild, something that valued substance over show. The household staff assembled on the steps as they arrived, a dozen men and women of varying ages, all watching with undisguised curiosity as their master handed down a young woman they had never seen before. Varyn addressed them with military efficiency. This is Lady Seren of Earl. She is under my protection and is to be accorded every courtesy. Mrs. Hallowell, please prepare the East Wing chambers. See that Lady Seren has everything she requires. An older woman with kind eyes and iron-grey hair stepped forward. Of course, Your Grace. My lady, if you will follow me. Seren glanced at Varyn, suddenly uncertain. He offered a slight nod of encouragement. Go, rest. We will speak in the morning. The East Wing chambers proved far larger and more luxurious than Seren had anticipated. A four-poster bed dominated the room, draped in deep green velvet. A fire already crackled in the hearth, and someone had laid out fresh nightclothes. Through the windows, she could see stars beginning to pierce the darkening sky. Mrs. Hallowell supervised two younger maids as they brought hot water for washing. His Grace said you might have need of wardrobe, my lady. I took the liberty of selecting some pieces that should fit reasonably well until proper arrangements can be made. You are very kind. Seren's voice felt small in the large room. All of you. Mrs. Hallowell's expression softened. His Grace is a good man, my lady, though the world often fails to see it. If he has brought you here, you may trust that you are safe. He does not offer protection lightly. After the servants departed, Seren stood before the fire, still wearing her traveling dress, the amber brooch catching firelight. The events of the day crashed over her in waves. The magistrate's office, her father's rejection, Varyn's confession about his sister, the long journey through countryside that felt increasingly foreign. She had done it. She had chosen herself. And now she stood in a stranger's house, dependent upon a man she barely knew, with no family, no resources, and no clear path forward. The terror of it should have crushed her. Instead, she felt something else stirring beneath the fear, something that might have been hope. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. My lady? One of the young maids peered around the door. His Grace requests your presence in the library if you are not too fatigued. He says there are matters to discuss, but they can wait until morning if you prefer. Seren's pulse quickened. No, I will come now. She followed the maid through corridors lined with paintings and tapestries that spoke of generations. The library proved to be a magnificent room, 2 stories tall with shelves reaching toward a vaulted ceiling. Varyn stood before the fire, still in his traveling clothes, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. Forgive the summons, he said as she entered. But there are practicalities that cannot wait. Please sit. Seren settled into a leather chair near the fire. Varyn remained standing, clearly more comfortable in motion than in stillness. You are now without family support, he began without preamble. That places you in a precarious position socially and financially. I wish to remedy that situation as best I can while preserving your independence. I am listening. I propose the following. You will reside here at Thornwild as my ward. The arrangement will be formal and legally documented. providing you with protection of my name and resources without requiring marriage or any entanglement of a personal nature. He spoke as though delivering a military briefing. You will have your own household budget, your own staff, freedom to come and go as you please. In return, I ask only that you allow me to ensure your safety and well-being. Seren studied him carefully. You offer me everything and ask nothing in return. That is not how the world works, Varyn. What do you truly want from this arrangement? He turned to face her fully, and in the firelight, his scarred features seemed less severe and more simply weary. I want to know that my sister's fate will not be yours. I want to sleep without dreaming of women trapped in marriages that slowly kill their spirits. I want— He paused, seeming to wrestle with words. I want you to have the chance to discover who you are when you are not being crushed beneath duty's wheel. That is all. That is everything. He set down his glass. I do not expect gratitude. I do not expect affection. I certainly do not expect romantic attachment. What I offer is sanctuary, nothing more and nothing less. Seren rose slowly, moving closer to where he stood. You are lying. His eyebrows rose. I beg your pardon? You are lying, she repeated, her voice steadier now. Not about the sanctuary or the protection, but about what you want. You want something else. I see it in your eyes when you think I am not looking. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, to her surprise, he smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his entire face. You are perceptive, Lady Seren. Very well, the truth. I want to see you smile without fear behind it. I want to hear you laugh as though laughter were your natural language. I want to watch you bloom into whoever you were meant to become before the world taught you to make yourself small. He paused. And yes, I want those things selfishly, because witnessing your transformation might convince me that not everything I touch turns to ash. The confession hung between them, raw and honest. Serene's hand found the amber brooch once more. That is a great deal of weight to place upon one woman, then reject it. Tell me I am a fool. Accept the practical arrangement, and we shall speak no more of transformations or blooming. I will not hold it against you. She considered him. This warrior who had killed men on battlefields but could not bear to watch a woman weep beneath apple trees. This duke who offered sanctuary while claiming to want nothing, then confessed to wanting everything. This scarred, complicated man who had upended her life and somehow made her grateful for the chaos. I accept your offer of wardship, she said carefully, and I accept your hope that I might transform, but I make no promises about smiling or laughing or blooming. Those things cannot be commanded, even by dukes. I would not want them commanded, only freely given if and when they come. Then we have an understanding. Seren extended her hand in the manner of sealing an agreement. Varyn took it, his grip warm and firm. We do indeed. But he did not immediately release her hand. Instead, he turned it palm up, studying the lines there as though they might contain prophecy. You have beautiful hands. Your father should have seen that. He should have seen all of you. My father saw only duty and disappointment. The words held no bitterness now, only truth. But perhaps that is his tragedy, not mine. Perhaps it is. Varyn finally released her hand, though his expression remained intent. You should rest. Tomorrow we begin the business of rebuilding your life on your own terms. Seren nodded and moved toward the door, but paused at the threshold. Varyn? Your sister? What was her name? His jaw tightened briefly. Ilara. Then I shall try to honor her memory by living fully. It seems the least I can do. Something in his eyes shifted, softened and sharpened simultaneously. That would please her greatly, and me. Seren returned to her chambers, her mind spinning. She changed into the borrowed nightgown, extinguished most of the candles and climbed into the enormous bed. Through the windows, she could see the night sky vast and star-scattered. She thought of her father's rejection, of Varyn's scarred hands and careful promises, of the terrifying freedom that stretched before her, and slowly, unexpectedly, she felt her lips curve into something that might have been a smile. It was small and fragile, this smile, but it was hers, and for the first time in her life, that felt like enough. The morning sun arrived gentle at Thornwild, nothing like the harsh dawns at Brimwall Keep. Seren woke to birdsong and the scent of fresh bread drifting up from the kitchens below. For a moment she forgot where she was, then memory returned in a rush that left her breathless. She had done it. She had walked away. Mrs. Hallowell appeared shortly after Seren rang for assistance, bringing tea and a knowing smile. His Grace takes breakfast in the morning room at 8, my lady. He asked that you join him if you are disposed to do so. If not, we are happy to bring a tray to your chambers. I will join him." Seren surprised herself with the certainty in her voice. The wardrobe Mrs. Hallowell had provided proved both tasteful and practical, day dresses in soft fabrics, nothing as elaborate as Brimwall's formal gowns, but infinitely more comfortable. Seren chose a dress of pale grey with delicate embroidery at the cuffs and collar, then fastened her mother's amber brooch at the throat. She found Varyn in the morning room, a space flooded with light from floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the gardens. He stood as she entered, offering a slight bow. "Good morning. I trust you slept reasonably well?" "Better than I expected, given everything." Seren accepted the chair he held for her. "Your home is peaceful." "I had forgotten what peace felt like." "Peace is a rare commodity." Varyn returned to his seat. "I intend to ensure you have ample supply of it here." Breakfast proceeded with surprising ease. They spoke of inconsequential things, the weather, the gardens, the history of Thornwild Manor, but beneath the pleasant conversation, Seren sensed questions hovering unasked, concerns neither quite dared voice. Finally, as servants cleared the dishes, Varyn said quietly, "There will be consequences, Seren. Your father has influence. Lord Trenmore has pride and connections. They will not accept your defection gracefully." "I know." She met his gaze steadily. "What form will the consequences take?" "Social ostracism, certainly. Rumors designed to destroy your reputation. Possibly legal challenges, though the magistrate's ruling should protect against most of those." He paused. "There may also be attempts to pressure me into withdrawing my protection. Political maneuvering, threats to alliances, that manner of thing. I would not blame you if you reconsidered." "Do not finish that sentence." His tone sharpened. "I do not reconsider decisions made on principle. We proceed forward, not backward." A commotion in the entrance hall interrupted them. Raised voices, urgent footsteps. Mrs. Hallowell appeared in the doorway, her expression troubled. "For your grace, forgive the intrusion. There are visitors. The Earl of Brimwall and Lord Trenmore. They demand to speak with you, immediately." Serene's stomach dropped. "They followed us." It would seem so. Varyn's face hardened into the warrior's mask Seren was beginning to recognize. "Mrs. Hallowell, show them to the receiving room. Lady Seren, you may retire if you wish. This conversation does not require your presence." "No." Seren stood, surprising herself with the firmness of her decision. "I will not hide. If they have come to speak of me, I will face them." Varyn studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well, but stay behind me. And if I tell you to leave, you leave." "Agreed." "Agreed." They proceeded to the receiving room together. Her father and Lord Trenmore stood near the windows, both looking travel-worn and furious. The Earl's eyes fixed upon Seren with such coldness that she felt it like a physical blow. "So," her father's voice dripped contempt. "The prodigal daughter appears. I had hoped you might have developed some sense during the night, but I see that hope was misplaced. If you have come to offer apology, you are welcome to deliver it," Varyn said mildly. "If you have come to make demands, you may leave. I demand the return of my daughter." The Earl's fist struck his palm for emphasis. "This farce has continued long enough. Seren, you will return to Brimwall Keep immediately. Lord Trenmore is prepared to overlook your lapse in judgment, provided you apologize and agree to proceed with the marriage." How magnanimous of him! Seren's words emerged steadier than she felt. "And if I refuse?" Lord Trenmore stepped forward, his pale eyes glittering with malice. "Then you will discover precisely how harsh the world can be toward women of ruined reputation. I have already sent word to London. By week's end, every drawing room will know that you are a creature of loose morals who ran away with a man not your husband. Your name will become synonymous with scandal." "You dare threaten her in my own house?" Varyn's voice went dangerously quiet. "I dare speak truth." Trenmore's smile was a razor. "And the truth is that no respectable family will receive her. No decent man will court her. She will wither into obscurity, a cautionary tale mothers tell their daughters about the price of disobedience." Seren felt ice slide through her veins. She had known there would be consequences, but hearing them articulated so coldly made them terrifyingly real. "Unless," Trenmore continued, "she returns now and fulfills her obligation. I am willing to accept her back, though the bride price will require adjustment given the circumstances. Say an additional £3,000 to compensate for the humiliation and inconvenience. You would extort money while pretending to offer mercy." Seren's voice shook with fury rather than fear. "You are not a gentleman, Lord Trenmore. You are a merchant selling human misery." His face flushed dark. "Guard your tongue, girl. You are in no position to—" "She is in every position." Varyn moved between them like a blade. "And you will address her with respect, or you will address the point of my sword. Choose carefully." The Earl raised his hands in a gesture of false conciliation. "Calm now, Your Grace. Surely we can resolve this as reasonable men. Return Seren to my custody. The marriage proceeds, and we forget this unfortunate episode ever occurred. I am even prepared to overlook your interference, given your decorated military service." "How generous!" Varyn's tone could have frozen fire. "Unfortunately, your offer disregards one rather significant detail. Lady Seren is not property to be returned. She is a woman of legal majority who has made her choice clear. The law supports her. I support her, and you have no authority here." "I have the authority of a father." The Earl's composure finally cracked. "She is my daughter, raised at my expense, and she owes me the obedience I paid for with 20 years of care." "Care?" The word burst from Seren before she could contain it. "You call it care to treat me as investment rather than child, to sell me to the highest bidder without once asking what I wanted. That is not care, father. That is ownership, and I refuse to be owned any longer." The Earl's hand rose as if to strike her. Varyn caught his wrist mid-motion with effortless strength. "Touch her," Varyn said softly, "and you will leave this house in pieces." For a heartbeat, violence hung in the air like suspended lightning. Then the Earl wrenched his arm free, breathing hard. "You will regret this, Wolcarne, both of you. I have friends in Parliament, in the courts, in every corridor of power that matters. I will make certain you pay for this insult. Then send me the bill." Varyn's smile held no humour. "I assure you I can afford it." Lord Trenmore placed a restraining hand on the Earl's shoulder. "Come, we waste breath arguing with fools. Let them have each other. When she is ruined and he is disgraced, they will have only themselves to blame." They turned toward the door, but Seren found herself speaking once more, her voice ringing clear. "Father, Lord Trenmore, before you leave, permit me to say one final thing." Both men paused, turning back with expressions of contempt. Seren drew herself to full height, one hand resting on the amber brooch. "I forgive you, both of you. Not because you deserve forgiveness, but because carrying hatred would poison whatever new life I build. You see me as disobedient, ungrateful, ruined. I see myself as free, and I would rather be free and alone than imprisoned and called respectable." Her father's face contorted. "You are dead to me. Then I mourn for the father I never truly had." Serene's voice held surprising gentleness. "Goodbye, father. I hope someday you learn to value hearts as much as you value contracts." They left without another word, the door closing behind them with terrible finality. The silence that followed felt enormous, echoing. Seren stood perfectly still, trembling slightly but not weeping. Varyn approached carefully, as one might approach a wounded creature. "That," he said quietly, "was the bravest thing I have ever witnessed, and I have witnessed cavalry charges." Serene laughed, a sound halfway between sob and genuine mirth. "I feel ill, and terrified, and somehow lighter. The truth often produces such contradictory sensations." He offered his arm. "Come, let us walk in the gardens. Fresh air will help settle your nerves." She took his arm, grateful for the support. They walked through the morning room and out into sunshine that seemed almost aggressively cheerful, given the darkness of what had just transpired. "He called me dead to him," Seren said, as they strolled between flower beds just beginning to bloom. "I suppose I should feel grief. Should is a word that causes immense suffering." Varyn's voice held hard-won wisdom. "Feel what you feel. Grief, relief, rage, liberation. All of it is valid. What do you feel?" He considered the question carefully. "Pride, admiration, and a profound wish to call out both of those men for dueling, though I suspect that would create more problems than it would solve." Seren found herself smiling despite everything. "You cannot duel everyone who offends me. You would never have time for breakfast." "A fair point." His lips quirked. "I shall restrain myself to only the most egregious offenders." They walked in companionable silence for a time, the morning sun warming away the chill of confrontation. Finally, Seren voiced the question that had been growing in her mind. "What happens now?" "Truly, Lord Trenmore meant what he said about London. The scandal will spread. Your reputation will suffer for sheltering me." "My reputation has survived worse." Varyn plucked a early bloom from a nearby bush and offered it to her. "As for what happens now, that depends entirely on what you wish to happen. You are free, Seren, perhaps for the first time in your life. What do you want to do with that freedom?" The question hung between them, vast and full of possibility. Seren held the flower carefully, studying its delicate petals. "I want to learn who I am, when no one is telling me who to be. I want to read books that were forbidden. I want to ride horses without a chaperone. I want to discover if I have talents beyond sitting prettily at dinner parties. She looked up at him. I want to live. Actually live. Is that foolish? It is the opposite of foolish. His grey eyes held warmth that made her breath catch. And I will help you accomplish every item on that list. Starting with the library. It contains several books your father would undoubtedly have forbidden, and we have excellent horses in the stable. Thank you. The words felt insufficient. For everything. For seeing me. For fighting for me. For giving me this chance. Thank you, he countered quietly. For being brave enough to take it. They stood together in the garden. Two people who had been shaped by loss and duty, now tentatively reaching toward something that might have been hope. The morning stretched before them, full of uncertain promise, and for both of them, that uncertain promise felt like enough. 3 weeks passed at Thornwild Manor, like pages turning in a book Seren had never been permitted to read. Each day brought small revelations, the discovery that she enjoyed riding at dawn when mist still clung to the fields, that she possessed an unexpected talent for sketching the gardens, that laughter came more easily when fear was not its constant companion. Varyn proved an unexpected guardian. He neither hovered nor disappeared, but maintained a careful presence that somehow managed to be both protective and liberating. They took meals together, rode through the estate, and spent long evenings in the library, where he introduced her to authors her father would have deemed inappropriate for young ladies. You have opinions, he observed one evening, as she set down a volume of philosophy with perhaps more force than necessary. That displeases you? It surprises me. Seren traced the book's spine. I was taught that ladies should not have strong opinions on matters of consequence, yet I find I have them regardless. About justice, about freedom, about the nature of duty versus the nature of love. And what do your opinions tell you? She met his gaze across the firelight. That the world is constructed by those who benefit from its construction, and that perhaps it is time for different architects. His smile was slow and genuine. You are becoming dangerous, Lady Seren. Dangerous women who think for themselves have historically caused enormous disruption to comfortable systems. Good. The word emerged fierce. Let them be disrupted. But peace at Thornwild could not last forever isolated from the world beyond its gates. The first crack appeared in the form of a letter delivered by special messenger. Varyn read it with an expression that grew progressively darker, then handed it to Seren without comment. The letter bore the seal of the Lord Chancellor. It contained, in formal legal language, a summons for Duke Varyn Wolcarne to appear before a special inquiry regarding allegations of corruption of a nobleman's daughter, interference in lawful contracts, and conduct unbecoming to one of his station. They mean to destroy you. Seren's hands trembled as she held the paper. My father and Lord Trenmore. They have found a way to strike back. They mean to try. Varyn's tone held steel. There is a difference between intention and execution. The inquiry cannot touch me legally. The magistrate's ruling protects both of us, but they can create spectacle, drag my name through scandal, and make life considerably more difficult. Then I will go with you. I will testify. I will tell them exactly how I was treated, what I chose, and why. Absolutely not. He stood abruptly, pacing to the window. That is precisely what they want. They wish to parade you before London society, to paint you as either victim or seductress, depending on which narrative serves them better. I will not allow it. You will not allow? Seren rose as well, her own temper flaring. I thought the entire purpose of my freedom was that I make my own decisions. Or does my agency only extend to decisions you approve of? He turned sharply, and for a moment she saw the warrior in him, the man who had commanded armies and made impossible choices in the field of battle. You do not understand what you are proposing. London society will eviscerate you. Every detail of your life will be examined, twisted, weaponized. They will ask questions designed to humiliate. They will do exactly what they have always done to women who dare step outside prescribed boundaries. Seren closed the distance between them. I know what I risk, Varyn, but I also know that hiding while you fight my battles makes me complicit in the very helplessness I sought to escape. I will not be that woman. Not anymore. His jaw worked as he struggled with some internal battle. You are certain? I have never been more certain of anything. Then we go together. He drew a slow breath. But we go prepared. There are allies I can call upon, members of Parliament who owe me favors, military companions who will speak to my character. We build a wall of support before we walk into that inquiry. How long do we have? The summons gives us 10 days. His expression hardened with determination. Then we will spend those 10 days wisely. The days that followed proved intense beyond anything Seren had anticipated. Varyn worked with the efficiency of a general planning campaign. Letters flew out to every corner of England. Visitors began arriving at Thornwild, officers who had served under Varyn's command, lords who spoke of his service to the crown, even a bishop who had known his late sister, and could attest to the pain her forced marriage had caused. Seren found herself interviewed by a barrister Varyn had retained, a sharp-eyed woman named Mrs. Cordelia Ashcroft, who specialized in cases involving women's legal rights. "Tell me everything," Mrs. Ashcroft instructed. "Leave out nothing. The small humiliations matter as much as the large ones. I need to understand the complete picture." So, Seren told her, about the contract signed without her knowledge, about Lord Trenmore's cold assessment of her as property, about her father's insistence that her feelings were immaterial, about weeping beneath apple trees and feeling the walls of her life closing in. Mrs. Ashcroft took notes with grim efficiency. "You are aware that they will attempt to destroy your credibility? They will suggest you were seduced by romantic fantasy, manipulated by the Duke, or simply too foolish to understand your own best interests. Let them try." Seren's voice held surprising calm. "I know who I am now. I did not know before. That alone makes everything worthwhile." On the 8th day, a second letter arrived, this one addressed to Seren rather than Varyn. She recognized the handwriting immediately. Her father. Inside, the Earl of Brimwall offered one final ultimatum: return to his custody, renounce any association with Duke Wolcarne, and he would withdraw all charges and petitions. She would be quietly married to a country squire of modest means, far from London, where the scandal might eventually be forgotten. "He offers you escape," Varyn said quietly as he read over her shoulder, "a return to obscurity rather than the spotlight of inquiry." Seren read the letter once more, then walked to the fireplace and fed it to the flames. They watched together as her father's words curled into ash. "I choose the spotlight," she said firmly. "I choose truth, and I choose to stand beside you when we face them." The night before their departure for London, Seren found sleep impossible. She stood at her chamber window, watching stars wheel overhead, and felt the weight of what lay ahead settle upon her shoulders. A soft knock at her door startled her. "Seren, may I enter?" Varyn's voice. She wrapped a shawl around her nightgown and opened the door. He stood in the corridor, still fully dressed, holding something wrapped in cloth. "I thought you might be awake," he said. "May I?" She stepped aside, allowing him into the sitting area of her chambers. Improper, certainly, but propriety seemed a distant concern given everything else they faced. He unwrapped the cloth, revealing a wooden box of polished walnut. "This belonged to my sister, Ilara. She left it to me with instructions that I should give it to someone who understood the value of choosing one's own path." Inside the box lay a necklace of remarkable beauty, amber stones interspersed with silver, each piece catching candlelight and holding it like captive sun. "It matches your brooch," Varyn said softly. "I noticed that the first day I saw you. Ilara loved amber. She said it proved that even insects trapped in time could become beautiful if the light struck them correctly." Seren's throat tightened. "I cannot accept something so precious." "You can. You must." He lifted the necklace, letting it pool in his palm. "Tomorrow we walk into battle, not with swords but with words and testimony. I would have you wear this as armor. Let them see that you are not alone. Let them see that my sister's memory stands with you." "Varyn," she struggled to find words, "why do you believe in me so fiercely? I'm just one woman. I'm not brave or special or—" "You are wrong." He moved closer, his grey eyes intense in the candlelight. "You are the bravest person I have ever known. You chose freedom when imprisonment would have been easier. You chose truth when lies would have been safer. You chose to stand and fight when running was offered. If that is not bravery, I do not know what is." Tears spilled down Seren's cheeks. "I am terrified. So am I." The confession seemed to cost him something. "But we will be terrified together. And tomorrow, when we face them all, you will wear my sister's amber and my promise that you will not stand alone." She nodded, unable to speak. He fastened the necklace around her throat with surprising gentleness, his fingers barely brushing her skin. The amber settled against her collarbone, warm and solid. "There." His voice roughened. "Now you carry both your mother's strength and my sister's courage. Between the two of them, you are formidably armored." "And what do I carry of yours?" The question emerged as barely a whisper. He was silent for a long moment. Then, so quietly she almost missed it. "My heart, if you will have it." The admission hung between them like something fragile and impossibly precious. Seren looked up at him, seeing clearly for perhaps the first time the truth written in his scarred features, devotion, longing, and something that might have been love. "I do not know if I am ready," she began. "I know." He stepped back, giving her space. "And I ask nothing. But I wanted you to know before tomorrow that whatever happens in that inquiry, whatever they say or insinuate or try to destroy, you have become essential to me, not as obligation or duty, but as something I did not know I was capable of feeling again." "What are we doing?" Seren asked, her voice breaking. "What is this becoming?" "I do not know." His smile was sad and hopeful simultaneously. "But perhaps we can discover the answer together, once we survive tomorrow." He left her then, closing the door with careful quietness. Seren stood alone in her chamber, one hand on the amber necklace, the other on her mother's brooch, feeling the weight and wonder of two confessions, her own and his, settling into her bones. Tomorrow they would face inquiry, scandal, and society's judgment. But tonight, for this moment, she allowed herself to feel something she had thought lost forever, hope that resembled love, and love that resembled home. London arrived grey and unwelcoming, the city wrapped in fog that seemed to mirror the moral ambiguity of what awaited them. Varyn had secured lodgings at a discreet townhouse in Mayfair, far enough from the main thoroughfares to avoid immediate attention, but close enough to Westminster for the inquiry. The morning of the hearing dawned cold. Seren dressed with Mrs. Ashcroft's assistance, choosing a gown of deep blue that conveyed both respectability and quiet defiance. She wore both amber pieces, her mother's brooch and Ilara's necklace, as the armor Varyn had promised they would be. "Remember," Mrs. Ashcroft coached as they prepared to leave, "answer only what is asked. Do not elaborate. Do not apologize. You have committed no crime. You exercised legal rights. That is all they need to know." The inquiry was held in a formal chamber within Westminster, a room designed to intimidate with its high ceilings and austere furnishings. Members of Parliament sat in judgment, their faces ranging from curious to openly hostile. Seren spotted her father in the gallery, his expression carved from ice. Beside him sat Lord Trenmore, whose pale eyes tracked her every movement with predatory intensity. The proceedings began with formal accusations read aloud by a clerk. Duke Varyn Wolcarne stood accused of interference in legal contracts, corruption of a nobleman's daughter, and conduct unbecoming his station. Lady Seren of Earl was named not as accused, but as evidence, a woman whose reputation had been destroyed, whose family honor had been compromised, whose future had been irrevocably damaged. The Earl of Brimwall testified first, painting a picture of a devoted father whose careful arrangements had been destroyed by a war-hardened duke with no understanding of proper society. He spoke of Seren as though she were a child incapable of reason, led astray by romantic delusion. "My daughter was content," he stated firmly, until Duke Wolcarne arrived and filled her head with seditious notions about independence and choice. She knew her duty. He corrupted that knowledge. Lord Trenmore followed, his testimony dripping with injured dignity. He described the marriage contract, the negotiations, the agreements reached in good faith. "I was prepared to offer Lady Seren every comfort, every advantage. Instead, I was humiliated, my honor questioned, my good name dragged through scandal. And for what? So that the Duke might play hero to a foolish girl." Then it was Varyn's turn. He stood before the inquiry with military bearing, his voice steady and clear. "Gentlemen, I am guilty only of recognizing injustice and possessing the means to address it. Lady Seren of Earl came to me not as seduced innocent, but as desperate woman seeking legal counsel. I provided that counsel. The magistrate ruled in her favor. I offered her sanctuary when her own father cast her out. These are not crimes. They are duties any man of conscience would perform." "You speak of conscience," one of the inquisitors challenged, "yet you knowingly disrupted a lawful arrangement between families of standing. Where is the conscience in chaos?" "There is no lawfulness in coercion," Varyn replied evenly. "A contract signed without the consent of all parties is not law. It is tyranny dressed in legal language. I disrupted nothing that deserved preservation." The questions continued, sharp and probing. They asked about his relationship with Seren, about his motivations, about his sister's death, and whether grief had clouded his judgment. Varyn answered each query with measured precision, neither yielding ground nor losing composure. Then Mrs. Ashcroft stood. "Gentlemen, if I may, the person most qualified to speak to these matters has not yet been heard. Lady Seren is present and willing to testify." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Several of the inquisitors exchanged glances. Seren's father half rose from his seat, his face purpling. "The lady is not on trial," one inquisitor protested. "Precisely," Mrs. Ashcroft countered. "Yet her entire future is being decided by men who have not bothered to ask her a single question. Perhaps that is the very problem we are here to address." After a tense consultation, the lead inquisitor nodded. "Very well. Lady Seren may approach." Seren stood on legs that trembled, but held. She walked to the witness position, her hand briefly touching the amber at her throat. The entire chamber fell silent as she took her place. "Lady Seren," the lead inquisitor began, his tone surprisingly gentle, "you understand that your testimony here will become public record, that it may have significant consequences for your future." "I understand, my lord." "Then tell us, in your own words, what transpired between yourself and Duke Wolcarne." Seren drew a breath that seemed to come from her very soul. "I was promised to Lord Trenmore without my consent. The contract was signed before I was informed. When I expressed reluctance, I was told my feelings were immaterial. I was told I existed to serve my family's interests, not my own. I was told, essentially, that I did not matter." Her voice strengthened as she continued. "Duke Wolcarne came to Brimwall Keep on diplomatic business. He witnessed my distress. He offered me information about legal provisions that might allow me to refuse the marriage. He did not seduce me. He did not manipulate me. He simply told me that I had rights under English law, and then he gave me the choice." "The choice to do what?" another inquisitor asked. "The choice to claim my own life." Seren met his gaze directly. "I went before a magistrate. I declared that I did not consent to the marriage. The magistrate ruled that without my explicit consent, the contract was invalid. This is law, gentlemen, not Duke Wolcarne's invention, but law that has existed for decades. He simply had the decency to inform me of its existence." Lord Trenmore's voice rang out from the gallery. "She was manipulated. She did not understand what she was doing." Seren turned to face him, and when she spoke, her voice carried through the chamber with perfect clarity. "I understood perfectly, Lord Trenmore. I understood that you viewed me as acquisition rather than person. I understood that my father valued political alliance over my happiness. I understood that if I married you, I would spend the rest of my life as decoration in your household, expected to produce heirs and maintain appearances while slowly suffocating under the weight of duties I never chose. I understood all of it, and I chose differently." The chamber erupted. Her father was shouting. Several inquisitors were attempting to restore order. Lord Trenmore had gone pale with rage, but Seren was not finished. She raised her voice above the chaos. "Gentlemen, you sit in judgment over Duke Wolcarne for the crime of treating me as though I possessed reason and agency. You condemn him for believing I am capable of making my own decisions, and in doing so, you prove precisely why his intervention was necessary. Because this chamber, this inquiry, this entire proceeding is based on the assumption that a woman cannot be trusted to know her own mind. That assumption is wrong, and it is cruel, and it is past time someone said so." Silence fell like a thunderclap. The lead inquisitor studied her for a long moment. "Lady Seren, you realize that by testifying thus, you make reconciliation with your family difficult?" "My lord, reconciliation was never possible. My father disowned me the moment I chose myself over his ambitions. I accept that consequence. What I will not accept is the suggestion that I am victim of anyone's machinations, save those who sought to marry me off without consent." "And your relationship with Duke Wolcarne, how would you characterize it?" Seren felt Varyn's presence behind her, solid and unwavering. "He is my guardian, my protector, my friend. He has asked nothing of me, save that I be allowed to discover who I am when I am not being crushed beneath expectations I did not choose. If that is corruption, then I pray for more corruption in this world." Mrs. Ashcroft stepped forward. "Gentlemen, I submit that this inquiry has revealed not scandal, but rather the opposite. Duke Wolcarne acted with perfect propriety. He informed Lady Seren of her legal rights. He accompanied her to the magistrate. When her father rejected her, he offered sanctuary. All of this is not only legal but commendable. The real question you must answer is this: do women in England have the right to refuse marriages they do not choose? If the answer is yes, then Duke Wolcarne acted correctly. If the answer is no, then we have larger problems than one duke's conscience." The inquisitors conferred in whispered consultation that seemed to last hours. Finally, the lead inquisitor cleared his throat. This inquiry finds that Duke Varyn Wolcarne acted within the bounds of English law. While his methods were unconventional, he committed no crime. The marriage contract between Lady Seren and Lord Halvor Trenmore is declared void due to lack of explicit consent. Duke Wolcarne's guardianship of Lady Seren is recognized as legal and proper. This matter is concluded. The gavel fell. The chamber erupted once more, but this time with the sound of resolution rather than chaos. Seren felt her knees weaken. Varyn's hand appeared at her elbow, steadying her with familiar gentleness. Together they walked through the gallery, past her father's furious glare and Lord Trenmore's impotent rage, out into the grey London afternoon. They did not speak until they reached the carriage. Once inside, away from watching eyes, Seren finally allowed herself to collapse against the seat, shaking with relief and residual fear. "You were magnificent," Varyn said quietly. "Every word was perfectly chosen, perfectly delivered. I thought I might faint," she admitted, "or weep, or simply run from the room. But you did none of those things. You stood, you spoke truth, and you changed minds. I watched their faces, Seren. You made them see you as human rather than property. That is no small feat." She turned to look at him, this complicated man who had disrupted her entire life and somehow made it worth living. "What happens now?" "Now we return to Thornwild." His grey eyes held warmth that made her heart stutter. "And you continue the work of discovering who you are, though I suspect you have already learned more about that than you realize." "Have I?" She smiled slightly. "What have I learned? That you are brave, that you are brilliant, that you possess a voice capable of silencing rooms full of powerful men, that you are worth fighting for." He paused, his expression shifting to something vulnerable. "And that I—" He trailed off, seeming to reconsider his words. "That you what?" Seren prompted gently. He looked at her for a long moment, then reached for her hand. His touch was careful, asking permission even as he made contact. "That I have fallen in love with you, completely and irrevocably, and I suspect I began falling that first morning when I found you weeping beneath apple trees and recognized myself in your sorrow." Seren's breath caught. "Varyn, I ask nothing," he continued quickly. "You need time to discover yourself, to heal, to grow beyond what they tried to make you. I can wait, I will wait, however long it takes. But I wanted you to know that when you are ready, if you are ever ready, my heart is yours. It has been yours since the moment you chose yourself over safety." She could have been cautious. She could have thanked him and retreated into careful politeness. But Seren had learned something in that chamber beyond her own courage. She had learned that life was too short for careful half measures, so instead she moved closer, her hand rising to touch his scarred face. "What if I told you I am already ready? What if I told you that somewhere between sanctuary and inquiry, between safety and standing for myself, I fell in love with you as well?" His expression transformed, hope and wonder, and something almost like disbelief. "Are you certain?" "Seren, I am not an easy man. I carry scars inside and out. I have seen and done things in war that haunt me still. I cannot offer you the polished courtship you deserve. I can only offer you truth, protection, and devotion that borders on terrifying. Then I accept all of it." She smiled through sudden tears. "The scars, the truth, the terrifying devotion, all of it, Varyn. Because you gave me something infinitely more precious than polished courtship. You gave me myself, and now I choose to give myself to you, freely, finally, completely." He kissed her then, gentle and fierce simultaneously, a kiss that tasted of relief and promise and futures not yet written, but finally possible. When they parted, both were trembling. "I will court you properly," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I will ask your permission for everything. You will stop talking," Seren interrupted, laughing, "and kiss me again. We can negotiate the details of proper courtship later. Right now, I simply want to feel what freedom tastes like." So he kissed her again, there in the carriage rolling through London streets, while rain began to fall against the windows, and somewhere in the distance, church bells rang the hour. They had faced inquiry and emerged victorious. They had chosen each other against every convention and expectation, and now they had the rest of their lives to discover what love looked like when it was chosen rather than imposed, cherished rather than commanded, celebrated rather than merely endured. It looked, Seren thought as Varyn's arms circled her with impossible gentleness, exactly like freedom. Spring arrived fully at Thornwild Manor, transforming the estate into something that resembled paradise. Apple trees that had been bare when Seren first wept beneath them now bloomed with impossible profusion, their white petals falling like snow across emerald lawns. The gardens, Mrs. Hallowell had carefully tended, exploded into riot of color, roses climbing ancient walls, lavender perfuming every breeze, hollyhocks reaching towards skies that seemed perpetually blue. 6 months had passed since the inquiry in London, 6 months of learning, growing, and discovering what life could be when it was lived, rather than merely endured. Seren spent her mornings in the library, devouring books on philosophy, history, and natural science. Her afternoons were claimed by riding through countryside that had become as familiar as her own heartbeat, and her evenings belonged to Varyn, to quiet conversations before the fire, to chess games she was learning to win, to companionship that deepened daily into something neither could have anticipated. The scandal had raged, certainly. London drawing rooms buzzed with whispers about the Duke who had stolen an Earl's daughter, and the ungrateful girl who had thrown away a respectable marriage for uncertain future. But the whispers had grown quieter as weeks turned to months, and no new catastrophes emerged. Those who mattered, the genuine friends Varyn had cultivated over years of service, had rallied to their support. Others simply lost interest when Seren failed to provide additional spectacle. Mrs. Ashcroft had become a regular visitor to Thornwild, bringing with her news of other women seeking legal assistance to escape unwanted marriages. A small movement had begun, quietly, composed of women who had heard Seren's testimony and found courage in her words. Change was coming, slowly but irrevocably, rippling outward from one woman's choice like circles spreading across still water. On this particular morning, Seren stood once more beneath the apple trees, but everything had changed. Where once she had wept alone, now Varyn stood beside her, his hand clasped in hers. Where once despair had consumed her, now hope bloomed as profusely as the flowers around them. "You are smiling," Varyn observed, his own lips curving in response. "That particular smile means you are thinking something significant. Tell me." "I was remembering the first time I stood here," Seren said softly, "how certain I was that my life had ended before it truly began. How convinced I was that duty would crush every other possibility. And now I know that sometimes what feels like ending is actually beginning, and that the bravest thing we can do is choose ourselves even when the entire world insists we choose differently." She turned to face him fully, her amber necklace catching morning light. "You taught me that. You and your sister, whose memory I carry every day." Varyn's expression softened with the particular tenderness he reserved only for her. "Elara would have loved you. She would have recognized herself in your courage. I hope I honor her memory. I hope that every woman who hears our story finds the strength to write her own." He drew her closer, one hand rising to cup her face. "You honor her simply by living fully, by refusing to make yourself small, by standing before rooms full of powerful men and demanding they see you as human. That is the greatest tribute you could offer." They stood together in comfortable silence, surrounded by falling petals and birdsong. 6 months of careful courtship had led them here, to love that was neither rushed nor uncertain, but rather built deliberately on foundation of mutual respect and genuine affection. Varyn had kept his promise to court her properly, asking permission for every touch, every kiss, every step deeper into intimacy. And Seren had discovered that being asked, being consulted, being treated as equal partner in shaping their relationship, made every moment infinitely more precious. "I have something to show you," Varyn said eventually. "A surprise, though I confess I am nervous about your reaction." Intrigued, Seren allowed him to lead her toward the eastern edge of the estate, where a small cottage stood nestled among oak trees. She had noticed it before, but assumed it was merely groundskeeper's quarters or storage building. Varyn opened the door with a key he produced from his coat pocket. Inside, Seren gasped. The cottage had been transformed into an artist's studio. Large windows flooded the space with northern light. Easels stood ready, brushes and paints organized with military precision. Blank canvases leaned against walls, waiting for her imagination. In one corner sat a writing desk with stacks of clean paper and pens of every description. Shelves held books on art, technique, color theory, everything a serious artist might need. "You mentioned once that you enjoyed sketching the gardens," Varyn said quietly, watching her face, "and I thought perhaps you might wish to pursue it more seriously. This could be your space, entirely yours. A room of your own where you might discover what other talents you possess beyond those society deemed appropriate. Seren turned to him, tears streaming freely down her cheeks. You did this for me. I did this for us. Because your joy has become essential to my happiness, and because I want you to have everything you were denied before: space, materials, time, permission to create without judgment or limitation. She threw her arms around him, overcome by gratitude and love so intense it felt almost like pain. How did I find you? How did we find each other? Perhaps we were always meant to, he murmured against her hair. Perhaps every battle I fought, every scar I earned, every piece of my heart that broke, perhaps all of it led me to that garden at precisely the moment you needed someone to see your suffering. I do not believe in destiny, but I believe in us, and that is enough. They stood together in the studio, surrounded by possibility, while sunlight painted everything in shades of gold. That evening, as had become their custom, they dined together in the small family dining room rather than the formal hall. Mrs. Hallowell had outdone herself with roasted lamb and early vegetables from the estate gardens. Wine flowed freely, and conversation ranged from politics to literature to the estate's summer plans. Afterward, they retired to the library. Seren had taken up her usual position in the leather chair near the fire, while Varyn stood by the window, watching stars emerge in the deepening twilight. But tonight, something felt different. The air hummed with anticipation, as though the universe itself held its breath. Varyn turned from the window, his expression serious but not unhappy. Seren, there is something I wish to ask you, something I have been contemplating for weeks, but wanted to be certain the time was right. Her heart began to race. I am listening. He crossed to where she sat and to her surprise knelt before her chair. From his coat he withdrew a small velvet box. 6 months ago, I offered you sanctuary. I offered you guardianship and protection and the space to discover yourself. You accepted, and in doing so, you changed my entire world. You brought light to corners of my life I had thought permanently darkened. You taught me that hearts can heal if given time and care. You showed me that love does not have to be duty. It can be choice, joyful and free. He opened the box, revealing a ring of extraordinary beauty, a large amber stone surrounded by smaller diamonds, set in gold, worked to resemble interlocking vines. Lady Seren of Earl, I am asking you now to choose me as I have chosen you, not from obligation or necessity or because society expects it, but because you wish it, because your heart, like mine, has found its home. Will you marry me? Will you become my wife, my partner, my equal in all things? Will you help me build a life where both of us are free to be fully ourselves? Seren's hands flew to her face, tears spilling once more. But these were tears of pure joy, uncomplicated by fear or grief. Yes, yes, Varyn, 1,000 times yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, as though it had been waiting for her all along. Then he rose and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with passion tempered by tenderness, desire balanced by reverence. When they finally parted, both breathless and laughing, Seren touched the ring with wonder. It matches my necklace, Ilara's necklace. The stone came from the same mine, Varyn confirmed. I had it commissioned months ago, waiting for the right moment. Ilara's amber, your mother's courage, our shared future, all bound together in one ring. You carry them with you always now. Tell me, Seren said, settling back into his embrace, how shall we marry? Another scandal? Or something quieter? Whatever you wish. We could marry tomorrow in the village chapel with only Mrs. Hallowell as witness. Or we could wait and plan something larger, or, he paused, considering, or we could do something entirely unprecedented. Marry here, at Thornwild, in the garden beneath those apple trees where we first met. Invite those who genuinely love us and exclude those who merely wish to judge. Create new traditions rather than bowing to old ones. That, Seren said decisively, sounds perfect. Marry where I wept and where you found me. Turn suffering into celebration. Make beauty from pain. Yes, that is exactly right. They spent the rest of the evening planning, not with the rigidity of society dictates, but with the creativity of two people determined to craft wedding that reflected their values. They would marry in autumn when the apple trees bore fruit, symbolizing harvest after long growth. They would write their own vows. They would invite Mrs. Ashcroft and the officers who had testified for Varyn and the women who had found courage in Seren's story. It would be small and genuine and theirs. Later, as Varyn walked Seren to her chambers, he paused at her door. I want you to know that nothing needs to change yet. We can continue as we have been, separate chambers, careful courtship, until the wedding if that is your preference. I will never assume or presume. Your comfort is paramount. Seren smiled. touching his scarred face with infinite gentleness. "I know, and I love you for that careful respect. But Varyn, I think I am ready for more. Not everything, perhaps, but more. I want to fall asleep in your arms. I want to wake knowing you are near. I want to stop living as though we are still strangers being proper, when we both know we are so much more than that." His expression transformed with joy and relief and desire carefully held in check. "Are you certain?" "I have never been more certain of anything." She opened her door, then extended her hand in invitation. "Come, let us discover together what freedom looks like when it includes love." So he entered her chambers, and the door closed behind them, and what transpired there belonged only to them, two souls learning that intimacy freely chosen was nothing like duty forcibly imposed, that love could be tender and passionate simultaneously, that bodies could speak languages words could never capture. And when dawn arrived, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, they lay tangled together in Seren's bed, both changed and changeless, both free and freely bound to each other. "I love you," Varyn whispered against her hair. "I will spend my life proving myself worthy of your choice." "You already have," Seren replied, tracing the scars on his chest, maps of battles fought and survived. "You gave me myself. Everything else is simply joy." The weeks that followed were filled with preparation and anticipation. Word of their engagement spread, naturally, and reactions varied wildly. Some of London society expressed horror. Others, quietly and privately, offered congratulations. Mrs. Ashcroft sent a letter of pure delight, noting that their marriage would serve as powerful symbol to other women seeking similar freedom. Seren's father did not respond at all. His silence spoke volumes, but others filled the space his absence created. The officers who had served under Varyn became protective older brothers. Mrs. Hallowell adopted Seren as the daughter she had never had. The tenants on Thornwell's estate, who had watched their duke grow softer and happier over 6 months, celebrated the engagement with genuine warmth. On the morning of the wedding, Seren woke alone, Varyn having returned to his own chambers to preserve the tradition of not seeing bride before ceremony. She dressed with Mrs. Hallowell's assistance in a gown of pale gold silk. Simple in construction, but exquisite in execution. She wore both amber pieces and the ring Varyn had given her, and in her hair she tucked fresh apple blossoms. "You look like autumn sunlight," Mrs. Hallowell said, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "He will forget how to breathe when he sees you." The ceremony took place in the garden, exactly as planned. Chairs had been arranged beneath the apple trees, now heavy with fruit. The afternoon sun cast everything in honey-colored light. Perhaps 30 guests attended, all genuine friends who had supported them through scandal and inquiry. Varyn waited at the makeshift altar, wearing his military dress uniform. When Seren appeared, walking alone because no father would give her away, she gave herself, as was right. His eyes did indeed widen with something like wonder. They spoke vows they had written themselves. Varyn promised to honor her autonomy, celebrate her growth, and love her without seeking to possess her. Seren promised to stand beside him through darkness and light, to see his scars as marks of survival rather than shame, and to choose him daily rather than simply once. When the vicar pronounced them married, Varyn kissed his bride with reverence that made half the guests weep. And when they turned to face their friends hand in hand, the applause that erupted was genuine and joyful. The celebration that followed was equally unconventional. No formal receiving line, no stuffy speeches. Just food and wine and music and dancing beneath stars that emerged like blessings. Seren danced with Varyn, then with the officers, then with Mrs. Hallowell, who laughed like a girl. Varyn danced with Mrs. Ashcroft and told her she was saving England one woman at a time. As midnight approached, the newlyweds slipped away from the celebration, walking hand in hand toward the cottage studio that had become Seren's creative sanctuary. Inside, Varyn had prepared one final surprise, the room filled with candles, their light multiplying in windows until the entire space glowed. "I wanted you to have this moment," he said softly. "Our wedding night in a space that represents everything we have built together. Not just physical love, though we will celebrate that too, but the recognition that our marriage is built on foundation of mutual respect, shared values, and genuine partnership. You are not my possession, Seren. You are my equal, my love, my home." Seren pulled him close, her amber jewelry catching candlelight until she seemed to glow from within. "And you are my freedom, my choice, my forever. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for fighting for me. Thank you for teaching me that love and liberty are not opposites, but rather two sides of the same precious truth. They made love slowly, reverently, in the candle-lit studio surrounded by blank canvases waiting to be filled, perfect metaphor for the life stretching before them. And when dawn arrived once more, they lay together knowing that every sunrise from this point forward would be shared, every challenge would be faced as partners, every joy would be doubled by having someone to celebrate with. Months turned to years. Seren's paintings began appearing in galleries, unsigned at first, then gradually acknowledged as hers. She became known for work that somehow captured both strength and vulnerability, that celebrated female autonomy without diminishing masculine tenderness. Critics called her visionary. Seren simply called herself free. Varyn retired from military service and devoted himself to estate management and supporting social reforms. He used his influence to push for legal protections for women, for education access, for recognition that human worth existed independent of gender. He and Mrs. Ashcroft became formidable allies in Parliament, two voices refusing to be silenced. Children came eventually, 3 of them, each taught from birth that their choices mattered, that their voices deserved hearing, that love was something freely given rather than demanded. The eldest daughter inherited her mother's amber brooch and her grandmother's courage. The son carried his father's name and his aunt Ilara's compassion. The youngest daughter possessed her mother's artistic gift and her father's strategic mind. And every autumn on their wedding anniversary, Varyn and Seren returned to the apple trees where their story had begun. They stood together, older now but no less devoted, and remembered the frightened girl who had wept alone and the warrior who had recognized her suffering. "Would you do it again?" Varyn asked one year, 20 years into their marriage, knowing everything that followed, the scandal, the difficulty, the years of rebuilding. Would you make the same choice? Seren touched the amber brooch, worn now with decades of cherishing. "Every single day. I would choose freedom every single day. And I would choose you every single day after that." He kissed her temple, his grey eyes still as intense as the first morning he had found her in this garden. "And I would walk away from my own inquiry again and again and again for the privilege of watching you bloom." They stood together beneath apple trees that had witnessed their transformation, surrounded by fruit that symbolized the harvest of difficult choices made with courage. Their children played nearby. Their legacy was being written by women who heard Seren's story and found their own voices. Their love had outlasted scandal and proved that partnerships built on mutual respect could weather any storm. And high above them, if anyone had been listening, they might have heard 2 women's laughter on the wind, Lady Seren's mother and Ilara, together in whatever realm held those who loved beyond death, celebrating the freedom their sacrifices had finally helped secure. The sun set golden over Thornweld Manor, painting everything it touched with light that resembled hope. And in the garden beneath apple trees, 2 people who had chosen each other against impossible odds stood hand in hand, living proof that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply claim our own lives. And love, real, chosen, mutual love, is always, always worth fighting for. This story asks us to consider a truth that echoes across centuries, that a life lived for others' expectations is not truly lived at all. Lady Seren's journey from dutiful daughter to self-determined woman mirrors the silent struggles of countless individuals, then and now, who are told their desires matter less than duty, their feelings less than family honor, their very selves less than the roles others demand they fill. But her story also illuminates something more hopeful, that liberation is possible when we find the courage to speak our truth, and that true love does not seek to possess, but rather to liberate. Duke Varyn represents not the typical hero who rescues a helpless woman, but rather the rarer figure who provides tools for self-rescue. He offers Seren not himself, but herself, information, resources, protection, and most critically, the radical belief that her choices matter. His love does not demand that she become his. Instead, it insists that she first become her own. Their relationship teaches us that genuine partnership requires 2 whole people choosing each other daily, not one person completing another's lack. The story's central question reverberates beyond its Victorian setting. What does it mean to be free? Seren discovers that freedom is not simply the absence of constraint, but the presence of agency, the right and ability to shape one's own life according to one's own values, to make mistakes that are truly hers, to pursue joy that is authentically chosen. Her father and Lord Trenmore represent systems of control that wrap themselves in the language of care, tradition, and propriety. They insist that Seren's submission is for her own good, that her duty serves a higher purpose, that her individual desires are selfish and dangerous. But the story exposes these claims as the self-serving justifications they are. True care honors autonomy. True tradition evolves with wisdom. True propriety never requires the crushing of human dignity. Perhaps most powerfully, this tale reminds us that choosing ourselves is not selfish. It is necessary. The oxygen mask must be secured on our own faces before we can help others breathe. Seren's journey to freedom does not make her less capable of love. It makes her more capable of love that is healthy, mutual, and life-giving. And for those who have felt trapped by family expectations, by cultural norms, by internalized beliefs about what they should be, this story offers a gentle insistence. You are allowed to choose differently. Your life belongs to you. And the people who truly love you will celebrate your becoming, not mourn your refusal to remain small. The amber brooch that Seren carries becomes a symbol of this truth, that even when we feel trapped in resin, hardened into forms others have chosen for us, we contain within ourselves the light that can transform pain into beauty. We simply need the courage to let that light shine. This is a story about more than romance. It is about the universal human right to self-determination, the sacred importance of consent in all its forms, and the revolutionary act of believing that one's own life has intrinsic value beyond what it provides to others. May we all find the courage to stand beneath our own apple trees and choose ourselves, and may we all find the wisdom to love those who do, not despite their freedom, but because of it. If Seren's story moved you, if Varyn's unwavering support inspired you, if this tale of choosing freedom over fear resonated with your own journey, please take a moment to share your thoughts. Subscribe to our channel so you never miss another story of courage, redemption, and love that liberates rather than constrains. Each subscription tells us that these narratives matter, that stories celebrating female agency and male allies who support rather than control need to be told and retold. Leave a comment below sharing your reaction. Did this story speak to your own experience? Does it remind you of someone you know who found the courage to choose themselves? What moment resonated most deeply with you? Your words create community among listeners who believe, as we do, that every person deserves to author their own life. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it, someone standing at their own crossroads, someone questioning whether their desires matter, someone who needs permission to believe that choosing themselves is not selfishness, but survival. Together, we create space for stories that challenge, comfort, and inspire. Together, we build a world where tales of freedom and partnership reach those who need them most. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of this community. Thank you for believing that stories have power to change hearts and, through hearts, to change the world. From all of us at Victorian Romance Audio Stories, we are deeply grateful for your time, your attention, and your willingness to journey with us through tales of love, courage, and the revolutionary act of choosing oneself. Until the next story, may you find the courage to live authentically, love freely, and choose boldly.